Chad in Chicago.
Chad.
Hello?
Hi, you're on.
All right. Yeah, I'm glad I got you guys. You guys are a little more on the left, aren't you? Like left to center?
Are you going to try to have another libertarian conversation? Because I'm not in the mood for that today.
No, I wouldn't. I won't mention libertarian. I just wanted to know for this next question. I was going to ask about separation of church and state. If let's say a church wanted to, let's say we want to express our religious views by performing same-sex marriages. It's part of our religion, and we want to perform gay marriages for people. And, you know, if you don't let us, you're like, you know, I don't know, like, would you support that or just say no because it's a church?
What the church does in the case of marriage is not legally binding. The only thing that really matters in the end in terms of a marriage is whether you can get the state certificate and whether it confers legal benefits. So
yeah, I guess that's true.
As far as I'm concerned, a church can do the cliche thing and marry a man and a dog. I mean, I don't want to equate that with gay marriage because that's not what I mean at all. But you know, I personally support gay marriage very much. But you know, I don't care what churches do in the end.
Yeah, and I wouldn't see that
as long as they're not setting laws.
Yeah, and I wouldn't see that specifically as a church-state separation issue either. And as Russell said, you know, if you get married in a church but there was no license and there was you didn't do any of the other things that you have to do to you'll get your wedding legally recognized, then it's just a ceremony, and it's no more of a legal marriage than.
Okay, that's really true. But in this hypothetical situation, let's assume that nobody's pushing for gay marriage, that we're not talking about it, and out of left field or right field rather, the church starts campaigning for gay marriage to say we want the right to perform this, and they were the only ones making noise about it, and nobody else really cared. Like, how would we? I mean, would we say no? That's your religious views, and keep that out of our laws, or would we say yeah, that's a good idea?
I mean, what do you mean by campaigning for it? Because I mean, I'm okay with churches expressing an opinion.
Yeah, and if it's a thing that they want to do in their church with their members, you know, they can do that, right? Just like they can have christenings and baptisms and what have you.
An easier example would maybe be if they were not gay marriage, but for something else. Like if the church was pushing for something that we didn't necessarily hate, but somebody could view it and say, yeah, that is kind of mixing their religion with our laws, I guess. Like, I can't think of a good analogy.
It would be more of a situation, I think a situation like you're trying to ask us about. Right. Maybe a scenario would be if churches insisted that all marriages, all legal marriages had to be carried out. For example, if they tried to get the government to perhaps support legislation where, all marriages must take place in some kind of house of worship to be legally recognized. Then I think, in other words, you couldn't go to a justice of the peace, or you just couldn't have your buddy who's got some, ministers or whatever, whatever certificate that you have to get.
And when you get married in the church, they can set some rules like you have to sign this document of faith and so forth.
If they were trying to do something like that, then you would be looking at maybe a definite church-state separation issue. You would be looking at a religious discrimination issue. It would take something like that. But, I think, though, that our Constitution would prohibit that kind of thing. You would not, hopefully, with the way that the country is swinging, I would hope that we would not see, we'd be in a really, pretty pile of shit if we ended up having this country, the churches in this country were allowed to dictate how all marriages, even to their non-members, even to people who did not practice that particular religion or faith tradition, were still able to dictate to everyone what a legal marriage should be. Fortunately, so that would be a problem. But fortunately, that's not what we have. And so maybe we should diligently watch against that, because
we certainly should.
Yeah, because again, all of the objections and all of the states that still have same-sex marriage illegal, the opposition to all of this has been, has been religious. There is frankly no valid, rational, secular argument against same-sex marriage that I've ever heard.
I know a couple.
Well, I can't imagine that there, I mean, maybe there are
All
some
the
that are
secular
made, but-
arguments I've heard for gay marriage could equally be applied to, against gay marriage, could equally well be applied to straight marriage.
Yeah, that is.
Not for children. I mean.
Yeah, but what I'm talking about valid arguments against. I mean, the argument that gay couples can't raise children is false.
Well, we don't really know. Like, there's never been any study, and it's kind of an
There
experiment
actually
going on
have
right in
been
front of us,
studies,
isn't it?
and they've shown no evidence whatsoever that that two gay parents are any worse than raising kids than straight parents.
I've seen studies on both sides of this issue, and like people on the other side say, "Oh, that study is BS." That's like total snowball study. And there's the ones on both sides, and there is one that says that it is harmful, and there's other ones that say it's not harmful. So
there are actually standards for saying studies are BS.
And I love that. And if people already have an ideological opposition to an idea, then of course any study that comes out that supports the idea, or if our people have an ideological preference to favor an idea, and there's some study that says no, the idea is bad, naturally they're going to say, well, that's BS or that's BS.
But he would highly disagree with you. The scientist who did that study, he would say, absolutely not. Like,
Who?
how dare you
Well,
use
yeah, well, I
things
mean,
to
yeah,
think
but the
it's like-
scientists would then have, he would have to show actual data that made his case, and then that data would have to be sort of
Right.
independently
That's
confirmed.
right. Right, that's
And
what-
meanwhile,
that's what I'm talking about.
every same-sex couple that I know of who has children, they have very lovely, happy children. So
I mean, obviously that can happen, and that's probably true in most cases.
Yeah.
But I feel like we don't know for sure, and it's like we should. Like, I wish. There
Well,
was a
then,
study
if we
that
don't know
looked
for
into it,
sure, then why don't we, by default, allow people to do what they want instead of arbitrarily outlawing something? We don't know that any particular straight couple is good at raising kids. Some of them are terrible at it. Maybe you could profile particular straight couples and determine, oh, we've decided you guys are unfit to have kids. But the bottom line is, in general, we tend to err on the side of more freedom.
Right, and I agree too. I feel the same way, but I just feel like one distinction I wanted to note was there isn't anything a gay American is receiving right now, or there's nothing that I'm receiving that he's not. He's not being denied anything that I'm getting.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, 100% sure. Like he can't get married to a man, but neither can I. It's not like I can,
Well,
but he can.
whoop-de-doo.
Yeah, I mean, what's that got to do with the price of tea and
because
China?
it just makes it just doesn't make sense when people say like, oh, like it's like you're outlining, because we don't we make the rule, not the exception to the rule. So we don't
Right.
say
So
everybody can get married
suppose
except
we
for you.
passed a law, we call it the Freedom of Voting Act, that says from now on nobody is ever allowed to vote for a libertarian. But it's equal because I'm not allowed to vote for a libertarian and neither are you. Are you cool with that?
Yeah, but it doesn't say in the law that the libertarian can't vote, and it doesn't say that a gay person can't get married.
That's essentially what you're saying right now.
Yeah.
The law says that here, this is marriage. It is a union between a man and a woman. That's what marriage is. And anybody can do this. This isn't restricted from anyone. Every man or woman in America
Yeah,
can
but the
get
point
married.
is, what you're talking about, you're attempting to come up with a weak justification for a specific law that when you take all the different kind of demographic groups in America, one particular group is adversely affected by that law, but you're trying to claim that it's a fair law because even though this one group is affected by it, all the others aren't inconvenienced. Or the fact that groups 1 through 10 aren't inconvenienced by particular legal restriction, but group 11 isn't, is something you're treating as an irrelevance. Because the claim is, yeah, but look, it's at least fair, right? I mean, it's fairly applied to everybody, and if the fact that it only presents a real restriction to one out of the many groups, compared to the fairness of it applying to everyone, that's a minor concern. But it's not a minor concern because you basically have it's discrimination. I mean, that's textbook discrimination.
No, I guess.
So,
I'd be willing to convince otherwise, but I think that it would be discrimination if they said everybody can get married except for you're a homosexual. Like, that would be discrimination. Like,
yeah, but when you tell people,
were you okay with laws against interracial marriage like 60 years ago?
no, that's the latter move we don't have to make. That's totally different. races. And
It's not
sexual
totally
orientation.
different.
It's not different because all of the arguments back
You
then.
could apply the exact same argument, and people did. You could say, look, I'm not allowed to marry a person outside my race, and neither is that guy over there, so it's totally fair. That is not fairness. People should be allowed to marry who they want.
I'm going to think about that analogy and kind of break it down, because I'm not sure I agree with it, but it might be analogous. I'm not sure. I think there might be a difference, but I think if they told if they told everybody that everybody can get married except for you, that is discrimination. There has to be a way to distinct.
Yeah, you can get married as long as you marry the kind of person we say you can marry.
Well, like I said, it's like, here's marriage. Anybody can do it. Nobody is restricted from this. Any man, woman, and American can take part in this union.
All right.
And it's like,
and which is openly discriminatory against people who aren't heterosexual, right?
Right.
I mean,
and I actually, I'm more of a libertarian, and I know you didn't want to hear that word.
Surprise.
Yeah, we gathered that. It's more like this.
Did I not guess that in the first 10 seconds of this call?
Yeah. So you could take any particular group with any particular focus and apply a law that has the pretense of fairness, but if this one group is the one that is more inconvenienced by the law, whereas all the other groups, well, this wasn't even something that would have entered into my sphere of influence, into my life experience in any way. So it's a law that doesn't even bother me. But this one particular group are specifically in a very major way, right? Then yes, that is discrimination. So, the pretense of fairness by saying, well, the discriminatory law still applies to the people who are in no way discriminated by the application of it, isn't really fairness.
Okay.
That's not fairness.
But do you just oppose specifically the religious opposition to gay marriage? That's what you oppose.
Well, but I think that because there are more religious opposition, religious-based, faith-based arguments against gay marriage, but as I said, so that might be a factor there. I mean, when the arguments are, well, God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and that of course that's all rubbish, right? But like I said, I have not seen any compelling argument, religious or secular, against why two consenting adults who happen to be of the same gender could not legally wed and spend their lives together. I've heard no good argument about it.
Yeah, if we could put the religious issues aside, then what? Then what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
Then you'd be left with no case against gay marriage.
Yeah, like I said, I haven't heard a good secular argument against the practice either. So.
Well, a lot of people think that, but if you take the religious issue aside, there are secular reasons for supporting gay marriage. And I think that atheism kind of necessarily hurts our image as atheists when you associate with groups like gay rights and gay marriage and stuff. It
That's
makes sense
disgusting.
Unless you're a bigoted asshole, it would not. No. It does not hurt atheism to be against discrimination and bigotry. And only a bigot would say that. So
Right.
bye.